Hi everyone, hope that you all are doing well. So as in my previous video, we discussed and implemented JDBC template with Spring Boot application. It was a basic implementation wherein I told you that what is JDBC template and how to implement it with your Spring Boot application. The link would be in the description. I would request you that you go and watch that video first. So today we'll work on complete CRUD application on JDBC template. So it is a complete basic operations on the database that we'll be performing using JDBC template. But before we jump into the video's context, let me request you that if you find my videos knowledgeable, please like, share and comment on the videos, and if new to the channel, please subscribe and press the bell icon. So let me first open the application that we made in the previous video. So I'm on my ID and let me show you the application that we made. This was our application that we made. So here if you go into the structure of the application, we have few packages, that is controller, model and repository. So here what we did, we made a person class and we stored first name, last name as the content of the person into the database, and the database that we are working on is MySQL. So what we can do is, let me first go to the controller and let me show that what all endpoints we made in the previous video. So this is our REST controller. Herein we made a get mapping, that is the getting all the data from the database. Right, so this was the endpoint that we made, and then a endpoint to save the data into the database. So we made two endpoints in the previous video. Now we will be completing the CRUD application here itself. So the operations that we'll be covering is find by ID, then the update operation, and then the delete by ID operation. So that will complete our CRUD application on JDBC template. So first let me make an endpoint here. Let's start by making endpoints here. So first let me make an endpoint of getting by ID. So this is my endpoint of getting by ID. So we are passing that the URL would be /ID. The ID would be passed by the user, and we are accepting the ID as a path variable, right? So the person would be passing the ID in the URL of the request of the API, and we'll be fetching that ID as a path variable, right? So what we have to do is we have to find the data, right? So let me say person. So here what we are doing, we are finding a single person, right? So we can say person equals to person repository dot find by ID. So find by ID method is not there right now, but we'll make that method later on. So find by ID, and then what we have to do is we have to simply return the data. So we can simply copy this out and we can return this data, right? So let me paste this here, right? So now the person data would be shown to the user by the ID, right? Now what? Now we have to make a find by ID method in the person repository. So let's go into the person repository and let's make the method, right? So let me go to person repository. First, what we have to do is we have made a interface and a implementation. So first we have to do is we have to go to the interface and we have to give a method there, that is find by ID, and then the implementation, that is the query that we have to run on the database, would be written in the person repository implementation. So let me say person find by ID, right? And we are giving a long ID, right? So this is the method, right? And this needs to be implemented in implementation. So here you can see that the error is being shown that the unimplemented method would be there. So the method that we have defined right now in the interface. So let me override that method too. So it says add unimplemented method, and I'll implement that. So we have the method. So where is that method? So here it is. So what we have to do is we have to simply get the data by the ID that is being supplied by the user and return the data, right? So what we can do, we can simply, as you can see in the above cases as well, so we can simply first write a query. So let me first write a query, that is string SQL equals, and what we can say, select star from person where ID equals question mark, right? So this is our query, and we have to return the result of this query. So what we can do, we can simply use the JDBC template pre-built methods. So we can say JDBC template. What we can use, JDBC template dot query for. So there is a method called as query for object. Query for object, right? So what we have to do is we have to pass here the new row mapper, right? The row mapper that we have defined above, person row mapper, and the third would be the ID that we are supplying, right? So this method we'll be using to fetch the data. So what it is doing, so it is running the query for the object. So the object would be fetched from this particular query. This ID would be associated with this particular ID in the where condition, right? So this ID would be passed by the user, and this ID would be taken as a parameter in a where clause, and this query would be run from this query for object method, right? And person row mapper, as I told you in the previous video as well, that it has been used to map the result set that we are getting to the object that we want as an output. So it is mapping our result set to the person object. So this method would return us find by ID data, right? So now if we go to the controller part, we already have completed the implementation for find by ID, right? So now we already have the finding all the data, that is the retrieval of the data, and find by ID, that is again the retrieval of the data, and then add person, that is the saving of the data into the database. So we have created it and we have retrieved the data. Now we need to update and delete the data. So now let me write the update query. So it would be a post mapping, or maybe you can use a put or a patch, but I'll use post mapping only. Let me say update, and let me define a method. We would be using response entity only, right? Because I want to return the result as well after the person has been fetched, right? So let me say update data, right? So this would be the method, and let me so here what we need is that a particular object would be passed, right? As we are running a query using JDBC template, it is not like same as the way that we used to do in the JPA way. With the JPA repository, when we used to run the queries, we don't need to supply the ID to the user, to the query, right? It automatically fetches the data on the basis of the unique clauses that we are giving, and on that basis it gets the data, and then updation is being performed. But here, as we are explicitly running the query, so we need to pass the ID as well for the person. So we'll have to give the complete object. That is, if we are updating the first name and the last name, we also have to supply the ID to the user in the update. So here we will be taking a response body, right? So as we are expecting that the complete JSON would be provided to us, so we'll say response body person, right? So complete object would be given to us. And now what we need, we have to simply update the data, right? So what we can do is we can simply say person repository dot update, right? So there is no update method, so we'll be updating the data. We'll be writing up update method in the repository. So this will update the data. But now what, as I said, that we'll be giving the output to the user as well. So what we have to do is we have to return something, and return the response entity object. So we can simply return the status as well, like we are doing it for the save method. Like you can see here that we are simply returning the status that the object has been created. But here I want to return an object that the object has been updated with that particular ID. So what we can do is we can simply use the previously defined method. So what we can say, return new response entity, and here what we have to pass, we have to simply say that we need to fetch the data with that particular ID. So we can say person repository dot find by ID, right? And the ID would be given by this person object that has been supplied by the user, get ID, right? And the status code, HTTP status, and that would be okay, right? So this will return us an why it is giving error. Sorry. I have taken response body. It should be request bodies. We are requesting the data. Sorry. So here we have to use the request body. That's why it was giving error. So now what we have done, we have first updated the data, and then we have also returned the data to the user that okay, this data has been updated with this particular ID that you have supplied. So now let's write the update method in the repository. So let's go into the repository, and as it would be a void method, it won't be returning anything. So let me say void update, right? And we are getting a person object. So let me say person, right? So we will have the object there. So now let's go to the implementation and let's implement the update method. It should show the error. Let me go above. Yes, it shows the error that there is some unimplemented methods. So let me implement those methods. So this is my update method. So the method is void. So what we have to do is we have to simply first write a update query. Let me say, as we are updating both the parameters in here, that is the first name and the last name. So we can write an update query to update both the parameters, both the fields, that is first name and the last name, on the basis of that particular ID. So now let me write the query. So query would be update person set first name last name where ID is this. So now what we have to do is we have to simply use the JDBC template and have to use update method, update. And in the update method, what we have to do is we have to first pass the SQL query, then we have to pass the data, right? So first the first name would be passed, that we are setting the first name here, right? And then what we have to set the last name. So let me pass the person dot get last name, and then in the where clause we are passing the ID, so we have to pass the ID here, person dot get ID, right? So this will update the data for that particular ID, right? So this is the update query done, right? So now we have already done the updation and find by ID, right? So now what is left, we'll run the application later on, but let's first complete the code. Now we are left with the delete query, right? So we have to delete the data with that particular ID. So same way we can perform, like it would be a delete endpoint, right? So it will be a delete mapping, and we need to pass the ID, and simply I can copy this out. Let me copy this and let me paste it here. We should reuse the code, right? So also we can take this particular code and paste it here. Let me rename the data, delete by ID, right? And the ID would be passed, and now I have to say delete by ID, or rather I could say delete, right? And here we'll define delete by ID. Now after the deletion, as the deletion is also a void data, a void call to the database, it doesn't return the data to you as the data is already been deleted. So we won't be having any object to return, right? So what we can simply say, we can simply pass the status here, right? So we can pass the status as okay here. So now we have to define a method called as delete by ID in our repository. So let me define a void method here. Let me say void delete by ID, and I have a long ID, right? Let me save and let me go to the implementation again, and let's write the query for this. So let me simply implement the method that it says, add an implemented method, and let me go to the end So here we have the delete by ID method. So what we have to do is, same way as we have fetched the data by ID, same way we have to delete the data by ID. So let me copy this out and let me paste this. Simply what we can do is, we don't need to return anything as this is a void method. So we can remove the return statement here. But now you have to change the select by delete. Rather than using query for object, because query for object was returning an object to us, what we can simply use is the update method, right? The update method can be used here as we have used it above, as it was a void method. So we can say update, and we are not getting any data after this query is being run, so we don't need the person row mapper. So what we can simply pass is SQL and the ID that we are getting from the user, right? So this will update the data, delete the data into the database, from the database. So now we are done with the queries, right? Why it is showing error? Is there any error? I don't see. Yeah, so error has been gone. So we are good with the interface, we are good with the implementation, and we are good with the controller part as well. So now you can see that we have already implemented the complete CRUD, right? So let's simply now let me show you first the properties that we already have added in the previous video. Let me go to the resources and application.properties. So we have already connected this application to MySQL database in the previous video, and same way right now also MySQL database. If I take you to MySQL workbench, you can see that we have the schema, we have the table, and even we have some data as well. So let me fetch the data. Let me first go to table and let me then run the query. So you can see some data into the database, right? So you have an ID that is 2 and the name as Dio and the last name as Alex, right? So what we can do, we can simply go to the ID, we can simply run the application and then go to the Postman to test the data. So let me go to the main class and let me run the application. So you can see that our application has started. So let's go to the Postman and let's run the endpoints, right? So let me first push some data into the database, that is the saving of data, right? So what we can do is we can simply use the post mapping, and let me change some data here. So let me say Raman, and let me say Preet, not Raman Dio, Raman Preet, right? So let me push this data into the database. So you can see that the status code is 201 created. So data is being published into the database, and now let me insert some other data as well. So let me say Ashish, and let me say the last name as Sharma. I'm taking some random name, right? So let me publish this data into the database. So it says 201 created. So we have entries into the database. Let me fetch again the data. So yes, you can see that the ID 3 Ramanpreet and ID 4 Ashish Sharma, right? So now what we can do, we have already published the data. So let's go and first find the data by ID, right? So what we can do, we can simply put the we can get the data, right? So let me say get mapping first here, right? We have the get mapping, and let me fetch the data on the basis of ID. So the ID, let's fetch the data of ID 3. So let me fetch the data of ID 3, right? And we don't need the body here. So let's say none, and let's send the request. So you can see that we have the data. The data is being fetched by the database. That is the ID 3, first name Raman, and the last name is Preet. Now what we can do is we can update the data, right? So for updating, the endpoint was /update, and let me go on the post mapping again, and let me go on the body, and let me go on the raw, and we already have the body. So let's say the first name is Raman and the last name is Preet Singh, right? So updation would be performed in the last name. first name would remain intact, right? So also, as I said, that the ID is required while updating. If we don't provide the ID, it won't update the data. So what we have to do is we have to simply send this ID as well. So let me copy this out and let me put this ID as well. So yes, so I'm also sending the ID, first name and the last name. So after updation also, the data should be displayed to us. So yes, you can see that the data has been updated into the database and our first name and last name are updated. So let's go to the database as well and let me fetch the data again. Let me fetch the data and let's see that the data has been updated. Yes, so the data has been updated for the ID 3. Now let's delete the ID 4, right? So let me simply say I have to perform deletion for ID 4 and the endpoint would be delete and we don't need the body. So let's send the request. So it says status code 200. So let's go to the database. The ID has been removed or not. So let me select this and let me run the query again. So yes, you can see that only ID 2 and 3 are remaining and the 4 is gone. Right. So this was the complete code, CRUD code for using the JDBC template. So this was it from this video. Hope that you find my videos knowledgeable. Please support the channel by liking, sharing and commenting on the videos. And if new to the channel, please subscribe and press the bell icon. Hope to see you in the next videos with some more interesting topic. Till then, happy learning and keep on learning with my videos.